Welcome to the Goji Center, the Great Hybrid War video. I'll be going over all the videos that started it all. And this first one is the truth about the ultimate swords. Invincible or epic fail. This is going to be combining multiple videos into one. Let's start with the one that started it all, before the Great Hybrid War began.
The Ultimasaurus, a creature whose clandestine origins, bizarre build, and mysterious nature has captured the curiosity of millions.
Yeah.
An amalgamation of beast, predator, and prey, unknown and unexplained to mankind until now. Today, Goji Center's analysis platform will bring the Ultimasaurus to life, explaining its composition, abilities, and most importantly, its viability in combat against the already existing plethora of Jurassic World predators.
Woo!
Would the Ultimasaurus dominate Jurassic, or would it be a tragic disappointment? Make sure to watch till the end to find out. Subscribe and get ready to witness this latest episode, The Ultimasaurus Explained. This episode will be divided into 5 parts. Its origin, genetic composition, viability in combat, engagements with other dinosaur species, and a special secret segment. Watch till the end to see what we have prepared. The Ultimasaurus was a canceled action figure from the Kenner Jurassic Park Chaos Effect line of toys. This line featured many hybrids, but perhaps the most popular of these, and ironically one that was never brought to fruition, was the Ultimasaurus. But what if it was real? The first question to answer is, where in the Jurassic timeline would we have found this creature? To answer this, we must look at the methodologies that could have been used to create this hybrid. The animals that could have been used to create the Ultimasaurus would have been the ones that had their genomes sequenced in the early 1990s, during the time period where Jurassic Park at Isla Nublar was undergoing construction, and when the Isla Sorna establishment was operating at max efficiency. It's also possible that at least some of the animals would have been sequenced in the Lockwood Manor prior to the events of Jurassic Park. But how many dinos are we talking about? Right now, we know that this creature was composed of 5, which is much less than the amount of genetic contributors found in the Indominus Rex's genome, who was introduced much later in the timeline. This fine-tuned splicing methodology that was used to create the Indominus Rex allowed scientists to create a much more refined creature. So what does this tell us? All evidence so far leads us to believe that the Ultimasaurus would have been found early on in the Jurassic timeline. This animal does not have the appearance or amount of genetic contributors to be something that would be created around the 2010s circa era. This hybrid's chaotic, mishmashed appearance also makes us speculate that creating something like this animal would have happened before the events of the first film, but no later than the 1990s when the amalgam testing was underway on Sorna, the set of tests that brought the Spinosaurus to life. Therefore, in this cinematic universe, the Ultimasaurus would have been one of the first, if not the first, hybrid ever created. That is, in the Jurassic Park era, not Jurassic World. Now, let's talk about what dinosaurs made up this hybrid. As mentioned earlier, there seems to be a total of 5 genetic contributors to the Ultimasaurus. The first and most prevalent being the Tyrannosaurus Rex, contributing to the general body shape, posture, and jaws. The next dinosaur in this list is the Ankylosaurus, whose genetics provided this hybrid's armored dorsum and tail club. Up next, and most notably, we have the Triceratops, whose genetic contribution gives the Ultima its distinguishable horned skull. But what about the arms and legs? This would have been contributed by raptors. And finally, these thagomizers on the end of this tail would have been courtesy of the Stegosaurus. It's important to note that all of these contributors would have had a significant contribution to the genetic makeup of this hybrid. To better explain this, we could look at the Indominus Rex, for example, whose base genome was the Tyrannosaurus Rex, at least 50 to 60%. Everything else would have been shared with the rest of the contributors, leaving them with a smaller percentage. With the Ultima, it's evident that the genetic pool was distributed a lot differently. with approximately 30% being taken up by the T-Rex, around 20% Raptor, 25% Ankylosaurus, 20% Trike, and 5% Stego. Also, note how these attributes are almost shared equally between carnivore and herbivore. This will be very important to remember later in this episode. Now that we understand what this thing is made of, now let's find out whether or not this thing would actually make a good combatant. To determine the combat viability of this hybrid, we need to find out corporal attributes and size. So, how big is the Ultimasaurus? You'd be surprised to know that although this hybrid is usually depicted as a gargantuan super predator dwarfing the rest, this animal probably fell short of that description.
Wait, huh?
Its figurine, despite being marketed as the big antagonist, was actually to scale with the medium to lower end of large carnivores. Furthermore, this figure was actually smaller than the Chaos Effect T-Rex.
Wow.
Toys aside, can this size difference be backed up by its animal's genome? Let's take a look. By accounting for all of its contributors, we see that the T-Rex would be the largest of these dinosaurs. The rest fall short by around 3 or so meters, with the smallest being the Raptor. Meaning that there is absolutely no reason why this animal should grow a lot larger than a T-Rex, but also not smaller than this Raptor. This averages out to a dinosaur that is similar to the figurine. But why can't it grow larger, like an Indominus, for instance? Unlike the Ultima, the T-Rex was not the biggest animal in the Indominus's genetic pool. Here we find large predators such as the Deinosuchus and Giganotosaurus that helped it grow a lot bigger. In Ultima's case, we can suspect that the significant amount of DNA composition in this hybrid was also the culprit behind its shrunken size, especially since the legs and arms resemble those of a raptor, which are not built to carry heavy theropods, especially with tons of armor on their backs. The end result would be an animal around 3 to 3.5 meters in height, 8 to 9.5 meters in length, weighing at around 4.5 to 5.5 metric tons. This puts it at around the size of a Baryonyx or a Ceratosaurus. Anything bigger would just make this thing too heavy to function. Perhaps it's for the best, especially since it's heavily armored from head to tail. But will its weapons make up for its smaller size? This animal has no shortage of weaponry. Gigantic claws on its hands and feet, long arms allowing a good reach of attack, a tyrannosaur-like jaw, armor plating, spiked tail club, and the Triceratops horns. Immediately, one might think that this thing would now be invincible. But by looking at all this from a critical standpoint, we might have a few issues. Let us explain. This sheer diversity in body types leads us to think that this could be another case of the jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none situation. The dinosaurs that contributed to this hybrid were actually built to be masters of their particular maneuvers and abilities, and anatomically built to carry those weapons. An example of this is the hybrid's armor. You may think that this animal was a good pouncer, but guess again. This armor and the relatively large size of this animal wouldn't allow it to spring off the ground as easily. This animal would much rather kick and pin the opponent down in conjunction with its arms, leveraging the weight from the armor and head. To be fair, this animal would still be able to be a good grappler, similar to the Spino given its long reach. The head of this animal is probably the most interesting, since it's a perfect split between the two most formidable herbivores and carnivores of all time, the T-Rex and the Triceratops. The frill space allowing for elongated jaw muscle anchoring would have resulted in this animal actually having a bite force comparable to that of a similar-sized T-Rex. It wouldn't have the bite force of a full-grown Rex, but very strong nonetheless once aided by the beak, slicing and hooking into flesh at the tip and crunching with these teeth. But would the horns do any good? This one is tricky, especially since this animal isn't specifically built to carry such a heavy head. Both the Trike and the T-Rex have special adaptations that allow them to swing large heads around. The outward splayed forelimbs of a Triceratops provide the perfect platform to effectively use these horns with purpose. And the T-Rex's strong neck muscles allowed it to bite, twist, and yank massive amounts of flesh, and lift up to 500 pounds of flesh and bone with each bite. The Ultima, not so much. Because it lacks the dense musculature and robust forelimbs, this animal wouldn't be able to use these horns as well as the Triceratops. Instead, it would perform lighter attacks such as fencing maneuvers, swinging its head, threatening to slash and stab rather than committing to a full-on charge. But against a large opponent with good grappling capabilities, these horns could actually be used against the Ultima. If grabbed by the horns, it would be easily controlled, pushed, or pulled down. So far, the conglomerate of weapons holds only some merit for the Ultima. But will its armor be of any good use? This set of osteoderms on its back would apply some protection against claws more than it would for full-on bites. Again, the big detrimental factor with having this much armor is sacrificing speed. More so if this creature has a theropod-like posture. Theropods usually have most of their weight distributed along the pelvis and tail. This, however, adds weight to the middle of their body, reducing speed, agility. However, it would be balanced thanks to the presence of its large head and arms. Lastly, we'll evaluate the use of its tail. For the Ultima, this would still make a viable weapon, but nowhere near as effective as a real-life Stegosaurus or Ankylosaurus. As mentioned many times, the contributing dinosaurs are specialized for using these weapons. Both the Anky and Stego have 4 limbs to keep them firmly grounded while winding up this weapon and striking. So, having both a club and Thagomizer would mean that this weapon would again be too heavy to swing without losing its balance. So its use would be limited, especially during the heat of combat. So, with so many heavy weapons, this all boils down to one critical concern: balance. Even if its agility is relatively decent, the fact that this animal's entire body weight is carried on its toes and that it has a high center of gravity means that it could get knocked over if hit in these areas on the flank. Although it may still be able to defend itself while upside down, getting back on its feet would be a more difficult and lengthy process. So far, it seems that all this weaponry actually took form as physical ailments, meaning that if this was in fact a real animal, its best strategy would be to play defense, swinging its horns, keeping an opponent at a distance, and only engaging once it has a clear opening to use its kicks, grapples, and finish with a deadly bite. Okay, we discussed its combat viability, so let's now talk about how this thing would interact with other dinosaurs. Because this animal is made up of 5 different creatures, one question will probably pop up. Can this Ultima communicate or get along with any of its 5 contributors? How would these animals react if this Ultima shows up? Stumbling upon an animal such as a Triceratops would go a little like this. The trike sees the immediate resemblance to its own thanks to the horns, which are indicative of its species. The Ultima might be able to get some points across with the frill. After a moment, its theropod-like posture and peculiar sounds may register it as an unknown threat. Running into a dinosaur such as a Stegosaurus would be immediate chaos, given its stark difference to its own specimens. Its vocalizations would also cause swift alarm. We see that even though this animal is around 50% herbivore, it won't exactly get along too well with its contributors. But what about carnivores? Would it find any luck getting along with a Rex, for instance? T-Rexes already associate these corporal attributes as those belonging to heavily armored herbivores, but will probably be confused given that it most likely sounds like a T-Rex and it's postured like a theropod. In Ultima's point of view, running into a T-Rex will also most likely be a mixed reaction of sorts, with one instinct seeing the T-Rex as a fellow predator, competitor, or worse, its anti-theropod instincts kick in, causing alarm bells to go off and immediately get defensive. Same goes with raptors. The Ultima would have been a dinosaur of extreme reactions. Its herbivorous herding instinct may have made it seek out company with no promise of success when its predatory instincts kick in, and become even more defensive and violent once it catches a whiff of a giant predator. Which leads us to our surprise segment, Battle Rounds with Other Dinosaurs. That's right. The last thing to do now is to quickly assess whether or not this animal would fare well against some of the creatures found here in Nublar. Let's begin with the medium-tier carnivores, such as the Carno, Baryonyx, Ceratosaurus, or Allosaurus. Now, because we mentioned that this creature was well-armored and equipped with strong grappling weapons and a bite that is far stronger than these opponents, we find very quickly that these would be at a big disadvantage. Although not as fast as these creatures, the Ultima would win this by adopting a defensive approach, waiting for the opponent to come within range to leverage its heavy weaponry, pin the opponent down, and most likely win these encounters. We can even go as far as assuming that this creature will fare well or be on par with the Scorpius Rex. Yes, this guy has venomous quills, but this isn't an animal that's smart enough to envenomate and retreat. Even if struck, this Scorpius and Ultima would still engage in a physical confrontation immediately afterwards. A pretty even fight. But past this weight class, it won't look pretty good. For the Ultima, taking on creatures such as a Triceratops or an Ankylosaurus would very likely be a difficult endeavor. It looks awesome, but it's really impractical against the heavy class. This animal lacks the size and agility to maneuver around a highly agile Triceratops, who, by the way, is adequately equipped to handle these horned weapons. The Ankylosaurus is a similar case. Its low posture makes it almost impenetrable from attacks from above. On the contrary, this animal who is equipped to use this tail effectively will inevitably land a well-placed strike to these raptors' legs and would handicap this animal for life.
Yeah.
Now for the big predators, such as T-Rex, the Giga, Spinosaurus, Indominus. Things look pretty grim. A T-Rex and a Giga's height advantage and much larger build would mean that this creature has enough mass to topple over the Ultima, exposing its underbelly and smaller limbs to a bone-crunching bite. Against the Spino and Indominus, things look even worse. These guys are grappling predators, meaning that its longer limbs and sturdy hind limbs power these guys to hold onto and topple over other smaller carnivores. And ironically, using these horns against the Ultima to topple this thing down or keep it in place. So, is this Ultima a complete and utter failure?
Yes!
Not exactly.
Oh?
We have yet another surprise coming. It just turns out that although this build may not be the ideal ultimate dinosaur on this island, this project would have been on the right track to becoming a formidable creature with more refined techniques. So, we took the liberty to further develop this creature into what we like to call Ultimasaurus 2.0. Ladies and gentlemen, we present Ultimasaurus Imperatrix. In order for this thing to be the formidable beast that is promised, and for it to properly leverage every single weapon in its arsenal, we modified its genetic components as such. 15% T-Rex, providing the endocranium or brain, mandible, and neck. 10% Triceratops prorsus, providing the cranium, upper back, shoulders, and extra jaw musculature. 15% Borealopelta, an ankylosaurid providing more adequate and sharper dorsal armor and spikes. 10% Stegosaurus, providing some osteoderm formations, thagomizer, and pelvis. 25% Ingentia prima, providing limbs, mobility, and core body. And finally, 25% Alamosaurus, providing sheer mass, hind limbs, pelvis contributions, and air sacs. The biggest difference between the original Ultimasaurus is that this new one is now a facultative biped, meaning the hybrid spends a majority of its time on all fours, but is capable of walking on its hind legs when needed. This is necessary since most of its components and weapons are all derived from four-legged herbivores. Being bipedal is a hard limiter on how big this thing can get. So, if we want this to grow up to 18 meters and 16 metric tons, this animal needs a more robust set of limbs. The body posture was changed from raptor to an animal known as Ingentia, a Triassic early sauropod that was comfortable on all fours and its hind limbs. Its wide frame, massive size, and stroud hind limbs are courtesy of Alamosaurus, who also provides internal air chambers which are connected to the lungs that increase oxygen flow, vent off excess heat, and increase stamina drastically. These sauropod passageways combined with the vocal cords of a T-Rex will cause this monster's roar to boom for many miles. Regarding speed, Is this creature faster than the original Ultima? Not quite. Sacrificing speed for stability is the only downside of this creature. However, this now means that this massively heavy build will not only be impossible to top over, but also inflict extremely heavy damage. Ultimasaurus Imperatrix earns her name by being fine-tuned with the right balance of defense and weaponry. Its long reach and being armed and armored means that flanking this animal will now carry a huge risk of counterattack. At this level, a tail club is impractical, which is why the Ankylosaurus component was replaced with the Borealopelta, an ankylosaurid with denser armor layering and compatible with armor that both the Alamosaurus and Stegosaurus provide. This Thagomizer of sorts is mounted on a long tail, capable of inflicting strikes many times more powerful than any Stegosaurus or Ankylosaurus could. Anything caught in the way of these would suffer extremely deep cuts, or risk getting cut into chunks by the impact. And now to strict offensive weapons. These forelimbs are the best of all worlds when it comes to grappling. Its large claw, courtesy of Ingentia, would concentrate the massive force behind any swing into this tip. This shape is perfect for smacking, stopping, crushing, and would make quick work of anything underneath its reach.
Woo!
And now to the business end, the skull. You'd be surprised that the combination of a Triceratops and T-Rex skull would work in perfect synergy. Both have really strong bite forces, but going deeper, the sheer mass and extra muscle attachment points found in Trike's frill help maintain this strong bite, despite blending both skulls. These teeth and beak will work in synergy, causing devastating crunching and cutting power. In combat, this thing would be a force of nature, attacking similar to a bear, rearing up and landing on the opponent using its deadly claws packed with immense force behind each blow, culminated by goring stabs and lethal bites. Subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to check out our merch store. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Okay, that was the Ultimasaurus design. So let's talk about this. What we know is that the Ultimasaurus was originally created for the classified toy line, but never got released because how, well, the production didn't sell well, and the Ultimasaurus toy was too risky to poking a kid's eye out, so we won't be able to see that in person. But there's been a lot of people, and I do mean a lot of people, who made 3D models of the thing, and even articulation-wise. And a lot of people made custom-made figures of the Ultimasaurus using existing figures. This was part of the Great Hybrid War, and the next one will come soon.
The Ultima.
Welcome to part 2 of the Great War. Now, I kind of forgot to mention I'll be doing a reaction to Goji Guys' Hank video and Magic Mesosaurus' Samson video, because they kind of been the one that made the big hits. This is called Can Ultima Imperatrix Conquer Jurassic Park? Let's watch and find out.
Imperatrix, the animal genetically engineered and made for stardom. Powerful enough to bring down theropods and sauropods alike. Made for the arena and spectacle of millions. Will this animal cut it in the wild? Today on Goji Center, we are bringing to light our first genetically modified hybrid dinosaur and spotlighting her biology, traits, and abilities to see if this new hybrid has what it takes to grow up and survive in Isla Sorna. Or might the would-be empress find her reign derailed the moment she hatched from an egg? It's time to find out. In a previous episode, we established that a dinosaur like the Ultima would be hypothetically brought to life during the beginning of the Jurassic Park era. At this point in time, the creation of any hybrid wouldn't have had the same kind of attunement and fine detail splicing the Indominus Rex had. The genetic components of Ultima Imperatrix would have been a total of 6. Few, but enough to create a juggernaut whose whole reason for existing was as a park attraction, not an animal that is meant to thrive in the wild.
Yeah,
in today's scenario, we'll unleash a new hatchling into the wild. Shortly after the amalgam testing that took place after the events of the Lost World. The testing responsible for the creation of new creatures such as the Spinosaurus, Ankylosaurus, and the quilled raptors. Today, something intended to live in captivity hatched shortly after the laboratory was evacuated. Something that was probably never meant to survive out here in the wild. But will life find a way?
Aww.
Hybrid name Ultima Imperatrix. Name meaning Ultimate Saurian Empress.
She's
At an
so
infant
cute.
stage, she would be 1.3
give
feet
a
in height
fuck.
in quadrupedal stance,
If I knew
2.2
nothing about
feet
it,
at
I would,
facultative
like,
bipedal
peck that
stance.
thing.
Length 4 feet, mass
You
over
probably kick the
22
shit out
pounds.
of it.
Diet omnivore, chiefly herbivore. Genetic components: Tyrannosaurus rex providing the endocranium, mandible, and neck. Triceratops prorsus providing cranium, upper back, shoulders, extra jaw musculature, and beak. Borealdopelta provides dorsal armor, osteoderms, lateral spines. Stegosaurus, osteoderm, subdermal armor on neck, thagomizer, pelvis. Ingentia prima, limbs, mobility, core, body, and Alamosaurus, air sacs, size, extra osteoderms, hind limbs, and pelvis. Before we move on, we'd like to invite you guys to play a fun little game while you watch the rest of this episode. Throughout this mini documentary, there will be 10 hidden redemption codes that will randomly appear. First 10 people to click the link below and enter the code will get a free audiobook copy of Prehistoria. In the spirit of walking with dinosaurs and presented by Goji Center's lead in-house researcher, this is a trek back 70 million years ago to showcase the life of a raptor like never seen before, after the life of one is upended by an encounter with a trio of dangerous predators. One part story, one part science, this is one for any dinosaur fan. Nothing gigantic starts like this. Most herbivorous dinosaurs start small upon hatching. Had the Imperatrix started out this small in the most dangerous environment on the planet, its fate might have been sealed before it even hatched. This is where T-Rex in the mix might cinch for it. Little known fact about dinosaur eggs is that theropods have some of the largest in the fossil record. Not only the biggest egg belongs to a theropod, but tyrannosaur eggs are nearly double the size of herbivorous dinosaurs, similar in size to T-Rex as adults. This would give the hybrid a more developed form and larger body size upon hatching. Hitting the ground and running at almost 2 feet long and 5 pounds, the Ultima would be big enough to defend itself from smaller threats in the undergrowth, like mammalian predators and compies. Still, there are bigger threats in the forest, with millions of years worth of instinct teaching them how to kill young dinosaurs before they become adults. All on her own, the would-be Empress might be vulnerable to dilos, compy packs, and raptors. In an island crawling with vicious predators, this animal would find shelter close to one of the most dangerous herbivores to ever exist. How? If the Ultima manages to hear and locate a herd of nearby Triceratops, the Ultima could employ what is called Wasmannian mimicry. Mimicry is the act of imitating other animals or something else. Biological mimicry takes many forms, such as a fly pretending to be a wasp, or cheetah cubs resembling cantankerous honey badgers. Wasmannian mimicry is the kind where one pretends to be another to live amongst them. In this case, the hybrid's budding horns and frill, useful for species identification, makes it look a lot like a young trike. And with Triceratops making up a decent amount of the hybrid's DNA, she could instinctively seek them out. Ceratopsian infants largely got their own food and moved about on their own, but were always protected by the adults. Baby Ultima will be just fine. If successful, Ultima now has a chance to grow up to be the most fierce combatant this island has ever seen. Growing up with the most aggressive and battle-adept herbivores will help in many ways. Locking horns and having sparring partners with other Triceratops will give Ultima plenty of experience on literally using her head. Because she will end up growing much larger than her ceratopsian counterparts, in her adolescent years she might outgrow these strikes, taking part in both intraspecific combat and against other big carnivores. This kind of behavior, or a young dinosaur being raised by another species, is nothing new, seen in nature today and known as brood parasites. Despite the name, this isn't always a bad thing. For instance, spotted cuckoo birds infamously lay their eggs in the nests of crows to be raised alongside the crow hatchlings. Only in this case, the toxic and foul-smelling defenses of the baby cuckoo end up protecting the crows that raise it. The hybrid in this case may be able to earn her keep. Sauropods like Ingentia and Alamosaurus that make up a majority of her genetic composition have surprisingly good color and night vision, more so than most other herbivorous dinosaurs. Bolstered by T-Rex genes, the Ultima could act as a lookout and alert the herd of oncoming threats, which helps her out in the long run. And should a trike or an attacker die from battle, the Ultima would have plenty of food managing that carcass. For those that may think this behavior is a bit bizarre and will likely spook the trikes, know that these two were known to supplement their diet with meat. So the mere act of eating a dead Ceratosaurus foolish enough to attack the herd won't really spook any trikes. There is a problem. Like any hybrid, any advantage will bring in disadvantages. We just talked about how T-Rex makes up a considerable chunk of this animal's brain, and after becoming large enough and brain more developed, coexisting with what is instinctively a prey animal and a mortal enemy species in the wild will be increasingly difficult. With random bursts of aggressive behavior, the other trikes will begin to keep their distance and eventually begin to shun the Ultima away. Coincidentally, it is around this age where young Triceratops would take off on their own. And fortunately for the Empress, in progress, her modified accelerated growth rate granted her a corporal build large enough to fend off against a good majority of the animals in this island already. Feeding on vegetation and any corpses she runs into, it won't take long for Sorna to begin shaking from footfalls of rumbling earth. Ultima Imperatrix, adult form, 20 feet tall in quadrupedal stance, 32 feet tall in facultative bipedal stance, length 60 feet, weight up to 18 tons. So, to talk about the part we've all been waiting for, let's discuss her weapons. The Ultima Imperatrix, upon reaching her full size, is literally armed head to toe and back with weaponry. This animal, as discussed already, is composed of animals who can be put into groups depending on their fight methodology. Both the Triceratops and T-Rex were used to using both their brow horns or lacrimal bones for blunt impacts, and both with an outstanding bite. Both Borealopelta and Stegosaurus may have used their tails for offense. Not to mention Ingentia prima and Alamosaurus being sauropods who may have used their tails and even their front limbs for intraspecies combat. Using these creatures with similar attack methodologies will cause less confusion and lessen split instincts during combat, like in the case of the Ultimasaurus, where the genetic contributors fought very differently. Starting at the business end of the now Empress, the head and neck alone of the Ultima would likely weigh nearly 2.6 tons. Just getting bashed or headbutt by this cranium is like getting a Ford F-150 truck of the same weight thrown at you. The jaw strength of the Tyrannosaurus would be augmented and bolstered by the enlarged jaw muscle attachment by the Triceratops DNA. That's right, if you didn't know, Ceratopsians actually come packed with some really strong bite forces. The frills on Ceratopsians serve many different purposes, but one of the earliest was to allow the major jaw muscles, the adductor mandibulae externus, more room to attach higher up on the skull. These massive herbivores used these traits to pulverize anything they got between their jaws. Scaling up to the size of the Ultima, the Empress could jump down with over 63,310 newtons of force. Assuming the Ultima is biting down with the middle portion of its jaw where the T-Rex-like teeth are, this could create forces in excess of 20,050 psi. If you can believe it, this bite might even get worse. Because for those teeth to sink in, so does that beak. Ceratopsians were no strangers to leveraging their sharp beaks for combat. This special bone, known as a predentary, some of the hardest bone in its body and laminated with keratin, could take and deal a lot of force. Mounted on this skull, the beak wouldn't bite down as hard as you might think because it is pretty far away from the middle portion of the mouth where the hardest bite force would be. Despite this, we estimate that this beak could still produce 9,700 psi, carving these sharp edges of the beak deep into the tissue, like the most lethal shears ever seen in the animal kingdom. The Ultima comes packing a pair of prongs over 2 meters long, and putting all its force behind these sharp points is going to be lethal. A stationary lunge or fencing maneuver with these horns could potentially produce well over 20,401 newtons of force. In a perfect stab, this could land a blow of over 7,400 psi. It gets even worse if Ultima was managing to get some speed behind her. While she wouldn't be breaking any land speed records at only 9.5 miles per hour, being 18 tons turns her into a living freight train. Once up to full speed against a target too slow or incapacitated to get out of the way, her horns wind up striking with an imperial 29,000 psi. This wouldn't just punch a hole in something, but it would send shockwaves through the body that can rupture organs not even directly hit. Like getting shot with a sniper rifle, doesn't really matter where the bullet hits, just what's connected to it. This hybrid monstrosity is equipped with much more, so strap in because we're only just getting started. Going from the head to the arms, Imperatrix being a quadruped only increases the amount of muscle mass on those forelimbs. Sporting a robust shoulder blade and the same dense musculature early sauropods have for both walking and fighting with their arms, each of the Ultima's forelimbs weigh over 3.5 tons. Factoring in a reasonable swing speed, and a smack from the Ultima would be like getting clobbered by the biggest bear in history times 20.
Damn.
Forces could range from 450 to as high as 867,000 newtons. This would be spread out across the impact site, comparable to a 50-mile-an-hour pickup truck crash. If this talon on the thumb, almost 4 feet long thanks to the Ingentia DNA, makes contact, those numbers and the rending injuries that followed could be catastrophically worse. Any unlucky victim that gets in range will be smacked, grabbed, shoved to the ground, gouged, and crushed. We'll continue down to the body of the Ultima. The armory itself on this animal is an asset all on its own. Ankylosaurus might be the most famous armored dinosaur, but its smaller relatives like Borealopelta put it to shame. Called a nodosaur, these were cousins of the Ankylosaurus that sported drastically thicker armor, upwards of 6 inches thick in this comparatively tiny dinosaur. Research by Michael Habib shows that nodosaur armor is layered multiple times over by sheets of keratin, bone, and underlying fibers woven under the skin. Together, this thick armor acts like hardened plates on top and Kevlar on the bottom. At Ultima size, the scaled-up version of this armor would mean that not even the mighty bite of a T-Rex would be capable of biting through, which could be up to 2 feet deep in some spots. Down in the underbelly, we have the armored titanosaur coming in, Alamosaurus. Underneath the hide on the flanks and belly are a fine mesh of smaller nodules of bone and dense fibers, acting like a layer of Kevlar and chainmail to protect the undercarriage. Between these and thick gastralia, effectively doubling the ribcage, the Empress is armored above and below. Lining the sides of the hybrid's armor are those formidable spikes, perfect for discouraging a flanking attacker or shoving into a foe when brawling. With some of the longest being over a meter long, these bladed spikes can potentially trap and scissor anything that gets caught between them when the spikes slide past each other. This is especially true on the tail, sporting a battery of spines that are much more effective at a larger size than other options like a tail club. The added height and longer tail thanks to the Alamosaurus additive means that this quasi-thagomizer has a reach of over 8 meters with spikes over 1.5 meters long. With it able to whip back and forth surprisingly fast, this makes approaching the hybrid from the flanks extremely risky. And we've already covered how bad of an idea it is to get in front of it anyways. What would all this weaponry be used on? Much of Site B is not going to be happy about that answer, both carnivore and herbivore alike. There's a few reasons why we mentioned that this animal isn't really meant for living in the wild. Fueling a body like this needs a lot of food. Research on dinosaur metabolism, modern and extinct, will give us some insight as to how much the Empress needs to eat. For every kilogram of body mass, this hybrid would need to eat between 25 and 30 calories of food. And with a mass of over 18,000 kilos, that translates to somewhere between 450,000 and 576,000 calories of food daily. Recall that this animal is mostly herbivorous, with around 70% of its diet being greenery. Thankfully, Sorna has nothing but a bounty of food to offer, likely inhabited by native farmers and then later built upon by InGen. There are a lot of feral crops and high-calorie prehistoric plants all over the island. Breadfruit, a common staple across the Pacific, fueled Maori explorers for centuries before it spread across Latin America. Just one contains 2,200 easily digested calories. But the other 30% is bloody business. Surely you want to hear how Imperatrix acquires this portion of her diet. The Ultima Imperatrix would be what is called a hyper-carnivore. These are predators that certainly eat their fill of bloody meals. A modern example that might be a good comparison is the iconic grizzly bear. With a combination of ambush tactics and sheer stubbornness, the Ultima could still hunt a large number of the big dinosaurs on the island, crunching slower-moving stegosaurus necks and skulls between its jaws, or crushing an ankylosaur with stomps and swipes would provide it a meal for days. Should the hybrid come up against another predator, a defensive swing of that tail might end up netting it another meal. Just like grizzlies, the hybrid might also leverage its huge size and imposing stature to intimidate other predators from their kills. This behavior, called kleptoparasitism,
tell that guy to fuck off. This is my food now, you cunt.
Just like grizzlies, a good chunk of the Ultima's meaty calories might come from bullying other carnivores off their kills. This no doubt will draw conflicts with the other two apex predators of the island. Any T-Rex she encounters might make a very fatal mistake of attacking what they might see as a rival predator, or possible prey if they key into the Triceratops' horns. If the buck and doe know better, they will avoid picking a fight, lest one of them gets widowed. This walking pile of aggro, however, the Spinosaurus is not only an apex predator in his own right, but one that goes out of his way to kill other apex predators. Eric Kirby's observations and a rumored cut Sorna sequence from Camp Cretaceous makes it very clear that this is one dinosaur who goes looking for a fight. This is one fight where the Spino's typical key advantage, weight, is reversed. Ultima is too armored for the sailback's claws and teeth to do much damage. Even a late adolescent Ultima would be able to have a decent chance against an aggressive Spinosaurus. Given her weight and a heavily armored body would make it a risky move to get anywhere near an intelligent animal with many weapons at her disposal. Yeah, you can see why this might not end up too well for the Spino. If it shows the sense it did when confronted by fire or a triumphant T-Rex duo, it too will run after failing to kill the Ultima. This leaves the Imperatrix with a run of the island in places that suit her. And any predators who survive an encounter with her will soon learn to avoid and give up kills if the giant Gestalt monster arrives. The Ultima would be the apex predator and an apex scavenger. Staking out near popular game trails like the one we saw in the Lost World would make this even easier. And it is here she would also find a beast fit for the Empress. These same game trails and riverways are frequented by the island's Brachiosaurus and Mamenchisaurus herds. Upwards of 30 to 60 tons apiece. In real life, these were formidable animals. Their InGen counterparts, however, have let's say a less impressive track record against theropods. Ramming those huge horns into the flank of a big target, bursting vitals and rupturing blood vessels with the shockwaves, this would be more than enough to make quick work of giants multiple times her size.
Damn.
Now, note that this animal wouldn't crash the entire ecosystem by recklessly killing, but it would be a dominant presence anywhere it went. This animal of sheer size, whose purpose is to be an entertainment combat animal, may have been able to settle into this ecosystem quite easily. Her reign, however, might find itself challenged in a scenario where another hybrid devastated Isla Nublar. Another hybrid who, by accident or searching for new domains, arrived on the shores of Site B.
That. So, Goji should have got a hint of him go be pairing both of his hybrids to fight. Now, will we start the hybrid that made the change of everything on the Indominus Rex. And if you want to buy some merchandise, link in the description down below. Well, if you go to the Goji Center video, but I will provide a link too.
The Indominus Rex was notorious for laying waste to an entire park, leaving nothing but mutilated corpses in her path. But here on Goji Center, we are going to take this even further. How can we make the Indominus herself more dangerous and her warpath more lethal? Today, we will deliver nothing else but more chaos, more carnage, more blood. In a previous episode, we talked about the Ultimasaurus and its anatomy, and ended up bringing forth an even more powerful dinosaur capable of bringing down just about anything this island could throw at it, even an angry sauropod. For this episode, we'll be doing more or less the same with the Indominus Rex, studying its genetic composition and replacing a few contributors with surprising life forms that you won't even see coming. The idea is to build a more lethal hybrid that will wipe out all significant life forms in this island, both big and small. And yes, this includes humans. This will require a different approach than what we did with Ultimasaurus Imperatrix. This animal was a result of creating a dinosaur that fits a certain template. The Indominus at the end of this episode will still be an Indominus, but will look different, since the objective is to cause an extinction event quickly and efficiently. Making this hybrid bigger will only mean that smaller life forms such as humans and below will be able to easily hide from this animal. We'll be reconstructing this hybrid to fit our extinction needs as we go, starting with the overall frame. Wait, no, not This type of frame, dude, this is for a poster. I guess the video editor couldn't think of a better way to plug in our sponsor, Displays, who provided us at Goji Center. Number 2, front limbs. It's 7% off your boost population on Nublar and Animal. Thanks to Display for sponsoring this episode. And now we can talk about the objective of this episode. If the objective is to try to reduce the population on Nublar, an animal bigger than the Indom wouldn't really cut it. This should be able to break inside some buildings as well as running down faster prey. So reconstructing the build might be necessary here. This doesn't mean that we're going to shrink the overall size. Remember, we do need to bring down these guys, sauropods too, so keeping her large will motivate her to keep hunting to meet her caloric needs. Outrunning the smaller life forms such as Gallimimus won't be necessary, since ambushing can do the trick just fine. So, what should we do? To begin, we'll reduce the size of the hind legs to make this animal a bit more quadrupedal. This seems counterintuitive, but consider that quadrupeds can distribute their weight on 4 limbs instead of just 2. This Indominus can now be potentially faster and quieter. That's right, now her weight can be distributed better instead of 2 booming footsteps, making her an even better ambush predator than she already is. Also, she now has a lower center of gravity, allowing her to have better balance and less likely to get toppled over. Our Indominus now looks a bit more menacing, but the biggest modification is about to begin. Number 2, front limbs. It's no secret that the Indominus is extremely intelligent, but giving her better limbs and better dexterity will allow her devilish ideas to come to fruition much easier. That's why we'll modify her forearms to take the traits of an ape, like a chimpanzee. Before you freak out, note that she already has opposable thumbs, a trait also seen in apes. So pushing the already suspected ape genome here would most definitely help the Indominus a lot more in combat. How? Let us explain. The forearms and shoulders of apes are anatomical marvels in the animal kingdom, given this arrangement of bones and muscle allow them to whirl their arms around 360 degrees. This range, if given to the Indominus, will make her grappling, mangling, and slashing so much more stronger that no other dinosaur will have any effective counter against these flexible maneuvers. But that's not all. This upgrade also comes with fast twitch muscles, making these arms a lot stronger than they already look. Any impact, grip, push, or throw will be many times more dangerous. And yes, throwing as well. One skill exclusive to apes is the ability to hold things, throw them, and even use tools. Now, admittedly, it's a bit bizarre to see an Indominus use tools, but if the objective is for the Indominus to effectively kill all life forms, she will have to be capable of reaching tiny humans hiding inside crevices with her own arms, or with whatever else she can find. No, this actually can happen. In the real world, chimps have been observed fashioning spears to jam into cramped spaces, impaling the small animals inside. Because of the ape genome coupled with the shorter hind legs, our Indominus will now move a little differently when she's walking. Knuckle walking would be a pretty easy way of getting around without ruining those claws. In the next section, we'll also be improving these. Our new Indominus is still capable of running on her hind legs, using her front arms as support when tearing through rough terrain, climbing steep inclines, and running through wide alleyways. This is now an all-terrain hybrid. Number 3, claws. Now to the business end of these already overpowered claws. Therizinosaurus was a good contributor to these, and they did function well enough. But how can we make these better? When it comes to slashing and rending as well as grappling, there is another more optimal shape from another carnivore. None other than the largest predator in the Jurassic, Saurophaganax. Being this big means killing big dinosaurs. And what better with than these? What you see here is a reconstruction, but does not represent the largest known specimen of this genus, so yeah, they could have been bigger than this. This sharp hook is the perfect shape to grip the victim compared to the straighter claws of the Indominus. Mixed with the ape-like forelimbs, these will literally shred through the skin of the thickest hides of some animals, as if you stuck a sharp hook in your mom's leather sofa. A hook like this inside, backed up by powerful fast-twitch movements, will destroy the thigh of any dinosaur. Even a sauropod would topple down from a wound from these claws. This weapon alone will lay waste to all large-sized creatures. This hand, now that we can call it that, will grip any animal, toppling it down and killing without even needing to involve the teeth. Its lower center of gravity, aided by a wider stance, will make it impossible for any herbivore or even large carnivore to flank this creature. Number 4, armor. With addition, subtraction will also be required. We already reduced the length of the hind legs, but we'll make another adjustment with this hybrid's armor. An animal this big, like the Indominus, only really needed to rely on its robust size and thick hide, rather than osteoderms. For instance, the T-Rex wasn't defeated here because she lacked armor, instead because she got out-grappled. Indominus would have been fine here with just her thick skin on top of her body. These spiky osteoderms are spread apart too much to be actually considered an effective form of armor, but were there just for the cool factor. The real armor here, and here was the thick skull and thick hide. This body armor on the upper body would have been courtesy of Carnotaurus and Majungasaurus. Upon looking at the animals themselves, we see that they both have tiny arms, kind of useless in combat. Keeping this mishmash of DNA would risk confusing the Indominus's instinct to use the forelimbs, complicating the internal anatomy now that this animal has even longer arms. Raptor DNA helps here, but we need something more to not only protect the Indom, but a contributor that is even more compatible with our now facultative quadrupedal hybrid. Meet the African dwarf crocodile. Okay, yes, it's a bit underwhelming at first glance, but this guy has something its bigger relatives lack. Armor on its upper body and below. Our Indom here was only armored from above and not from the sides. So now, with our croc here making itself present in this genetic composition, we now have full body armor to work with. Not extremely thick and scaly like the Giga, but something resembling this croc's thick hide. That is the part that's not covered by osteoderms. Something thick enough to fend off firearm projectiles and slashes. Another reason why this is the perfect animal to supply armor from is because this creature also has longer legs than your typical crocodilian. These guys spend most of their time on land and are known for rushing prey beyond cover of water. This muscular tail will help counterbalance the added bulk to the modified Indom forelimbs, making bipedalism easy when it wants to run on two legs. For this reason, the African dwarf croc proves itself a better contributor than the Abelisaurus. Not to mention that this new crocodilian-like tail and genetics now allows the Indominus to be more aquatic. Sure, the crocodilian attributes are already present with the integration of Deinosuchus DNA, but our Indominus 2.0 will have a bit more crocodilian influence to its overall build, making it able to pursue animals on both land and water. Oh, but adding a dwarf crocodile is going to affect the size of this animal, right? No. Consider that adding raptor, a Bellosaurus less than 2 tons, cuttlefish, and tree frogs didn't seem to shrink the damn thing. So adding a bit of reptilian croc DNA won't have too much effect. Okay, enough with the armor. Let's get to the fun stuff. Number 5, the bite. Is it even possible to make this bite better here? Believe it or not, there is. The bite of the Indom was already kinda OP, given that the T-Rex base genome was already involved. The robust head of the T-Rex allowed the Indominus to be resilient enough to withstand heavy blows. But another one involved was the Deinosuchus, which from a critical point of view didn't add much apart from bite force. Croc teeth are meant for penetrating and gripping, which compared to the effects of a T-Rex bite, the T-Rex bite method proves more lethal and messy.
Damn.
It's likely that the exposed teeth of the Indom were courtesy of the Deinosuchus, but having exposed teeth can be a problem. Without any lips or gum tissue, the teeth would be at risk of rotting, weakening the enamel. That's if they're not submerged in water regularly. And since our Indom is not submerged in water all the time, we may have a problem here. So today, we'll take the Deinosuchus genome away, since a well-placed bite of a T-Rex powered jaw will be more than enough to handle just about anything alive on land. Instead, we'll make this bite deadlier by the incorporation of a powerful predator known to hunt down animals larger than itself. A cold-blooded killer with a brutal set of teeth, an insatiable thirst for blood, eating more than its body weight every single day. No, seriously, we're not kidding.
What?
Meet the northern short-tailed shrew.
Nothing.
This animal was selected more so because of what's going on under the hood. See for yourself. This dude's grill features a tiny array of weapons of mass destruction. Jaws loaded with fast-twitch muscles and known to gnaw through bone and protective shells in a span of seconds. This red stuff here, not blood. In fact, any unlucky victim would wish it was. This black and red coloration comes from high amounts of iron.
Iron blood?
Into the composition of the teeth, producing extremely sharp cutting edges capable of sawing into prey. So, in effect, these teeth are metal. If this still fails to impress, We'll have you know that this animal is one of those extremely rare examples of venomous mammals. That's right. Unlike a snake where it injects its venom through its fangs, this creature will violently jam its frontal tusks and insert venom violently all over the place, leaving a bloody mess. Now, some more factors can come into play as well. To make matters worse for the victims of this newly improved Indominus, this shrew lives in a near constant state of adrenaline rush, making it move faster, kill faster, eat faster, and as a result, will end up eating many times its own weight, in turn motivating our already hungry Indom to kill at a faster rate. Combine these new tooth attributes with that of a T-Rex bite, and we potentially have the most lethal bite in the Jurassic franchise. This scene, our new Indom would shatter this ball like a light bulb. You may think that this animal can't get any worse, but you're very wrong. Number 6. What is more dangerous than one hybrid? Multiple. And no, we won't need Mr. Indominus for this, because in this scenario, Miss Indom won't need no man. Admittedly, the Indominus in Jurassic World may have possibly had this ability genetically blocked per se, as to not repeat the same mistakes made in Jurassic Park, where these raptors started breeding without a male counterpart. We aren't sure of this, but to make this more interesting, we'll allow this ability to play out in order for our new Indom to produce more clones of herself. By adding some whiptail lizard into the mix, an animal known for deliberately reproducing without a mate. This has been seen before already with the Scorpius rex via parthenogenesis. The Scorpios, however, would undergo a meiosis parthenogenesis, given that the offspring was a bit different than the mother, and not all traits were inherited by the baby Scorpios. In this scenario, all traits and all physical attributes will be passed down from mother to offspring, bringing forth exact replicas of the mother using apomictic parthenogenesis. This increases the likelihood of all of these new Indoms to work together, coordinating attacks like raptors, effectively killing all surrounding human life in a very short time.
Shit!
Not to mention, these guys are smaller, faster, able to run through hallways in smaller areas, able to grow at much faster rates than your normal dinosaur, and even if the mother dies or gets killed, she'll just end up getting replaced by another identical hybrid who can also reproduce. These smaller hyper-adrenalized hybrids will end up sweeping the island, bringing down medium-sized creatures via coordinated attacks. In no time, the human and dinosaur population will be rendered down to very few, turning this island's sweep into a search and kill operation. We've successfully created an animal that can cause an extinction-level event in this island, but there's a chance we could turn this into a global catastrophe.
Uh-oh.
Number 7, Plague. With so much carnage and bloodshed happening in this island, it will be inevitable for disease to spread. The putrid scent of rotting corpses fills the air as hordes of blood-stained Indominus rexes run around looking for the next thing to kill. One nasty aspect when it comes to genetics is that when dealing with life forms, the microscopic ones are infinitely harder to control. We're talking about viruses. To put this very, very simply, viruses hijack cells and the DNA chain to make copies of themselves. They leave traces of themselves in the host, and the host will leave traces of itself in the virus. So they both exchange information, basically. When the virus jumps to another different species, it will die off because it was not able to replicate. But if it does replicate, then a new strain is made, which can be terrifyingly deadly to this new infected species. What does this have anything to do with our Indominus extinction event? Over 61% of all major viruses and bacteria-borne diseases started out in one type of animal before jumping to humans. Consider that the Indominus would be a large-bodied predator roaming over a large area, miring itself with all sorts of diseases, bacteria, fecal matter, blood, and all sorts of pestilent elements. And since it's a hybrid, it will pick up all sorts of bacteria from both birds and mammals. Rabies, avian pox, flu, and the moment one unlucky human just gets near a place an Indominus has been, drinks the same water, or just breathes the same air, then this dude risks getting contaminated and spreading it out to his companions. But wait, this guy is a human. How did this hybrid infect this human? Well, if you remember, our ape genetic contribution earlier also serves a different purpose. Bridging or breaking a genetic barrier for a virus to potentially affect humans. Producing a deadly strain, spreading amongst anyone who manages to escape the island, both bird and human alike, leaving millions of dead life forms in its wake.
That was the perfection on Indominus 2.0. As we know, this caused the Great Hyper War. A Goji guy made his own kaiju dinosaur hyper named Hank to be combatant against, well, our Indom here. And fourth, we will be doing another reaction on Goji guy and Madam Mesosaurus hybrids in a separate videos, while we're continuing on with the Great Hyper War made by Goji Center. That would mean the breakdown for Hank will be skipped. So, I'll be skipping that one and continuing on with the Hyper War.
Here on Goji Center HQ, the team was minding our own business. Let's imagine.
Now this one is to perfect the Indoraptor. Let us begin.
For a moment that the auction in the Lockwood Manor went a little different, and instead the Indoraptor was not sold to Russian mobster Anton Orlov, but someone else.
What are you doing? This animal is not for sale. Relax. We'll make some more. And so will they.
Yeah, well, in this case, they happens to be Goji Center. And in this alternate universe, the research and artists from Goji Center HQ will do exactly as Dr. Wu feared. Except instead of making more of these, we'll go ahead and make a few augmentations. Take this prototype and turn it into a creature capable of dispatching humans in the worst ways imaginable. Today's design will be made with the intent of creating a viable attack animal that could go toe-to-toe with almost any dinosaur that it might feasibly encounter. Except something huge like a T-Rex or Indom 2.0, but more so as a reliable means of dispatching human opponents. Before we begin cooking up Indoraptor 2.0, we should keep in mind three things. Number one, recall that the Indoraptor in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom was an unstable prototype, and so the final design may have looked very different from what we saw in the movie. Secondly, the purpose of this reimagining won't be just to make an Indoraptor more lethal. It absolutely will be, but also to look for and add traits that will help get the job done, and also be a much more viable working animal. After all, wolves are far more dangerous than most dogs, and yet we don't use attack wolves in canine units. Today, the animals involved in the Raptor 2.0 genome will only bring helpful traits to the table, or have the right kind of social behavior to work well with its human handlers. And third, the purpose it was really meant for is still unknown. Let's remember that a well-trained assassin marksman can kill a target from far away much more easily than having a one-ton dinosaur chasing after them. The exact true purpose of the Indoraptor is a question in and of itself that will be addressed in a future video. First things first, unlike the Indominus 2.0 from a previous episode, we're scrapping the entire prototype to start from scratch. The Indoraptor prototype already had well over a dozen species in the genome from the Indominus and anything else Wu modified into it. This affected its behavior because there were too many conflicting instincts or abilities, preventing it from using its best traits effectively. Adding even more elements would only make the situation worse. For this animal, we want the exact right behavior and skills, so we're starting from scratch. However, in order for this to still be considered a raptor per se, we'll keep the same frame as the Indoraptor. The components, as you'll soon find out, will be different. Let's start section number 1 with the body. This will have a few components, and to give it the best locomotive attributes possible, we'll start with the tail and leg anatomy. Okay, yes, it might sound weird to start out a conversation about a modified raptor with a herbivorous dinosaur, but here comes a special boost to this animal's movement. Hadrosaurs were some of the most successful large dinosaurs across the late Cretaceous and could be favorably compared to animals like horses. A key to their success was fantastic stamina thanks to a unique part of their tail anatomy. With very tall neural spines for a rigid tail, but plenty of muscle attachment, animals like Edmontosaurus could accelerate very quickly, but also maintain this speed for a very long span of time.
Nice.
Additionally, mummies of such dinosaurs showed they had very thick pads on their feet to cushion against high-speed impacts in running long distances. Our Indoraptor 2.0 will be augmented with a similar skeletal and muscular structure to the legs and tail, allowing Indoraptor 2.0 to run long distances out in the field without tiring out. It could be deployed in one area and then quickly run for miles without exhausting itself. Now it's time to add the contributor of the main frame of this new Indoraptor. Out of the dozens of Dromaeosaur species with widely ranging behaviors, it was very likely the largest and most powerful raptors were the most cooperative, and thus more likely to hunt in packs. This new redesigned Indoraptor will use Utah Raptor as the base template, instead of a heavily modified Deinonychus or Velociraptor from the film version. Specifically, this would be the speculative JP Universe Utah Raptor used in a prior video, because that one for sure would have superb problem-solving and pack-hunting skills. A compatible addition to the Utah Raptor will be the in-universe Atrociraptor. That is to replace any leftover Velociraptor genome. Not enough to affect or slim down the build too much, but to further bolster this dromaeosaurid posture and cognitive skills. More on this in a little bit. Still, Utah Raptor does make up the majority of the build for a good reason. This not only supplies a much sturdier and stronger frame, but brings in helpful extra weapons more lethal than other raptors. Despite being slightly lighter than the original prototype, this Indoraptor 2.0 is packed with more muscles and a highly pneumatic skeleton with hollow bones that have reinforcing structures in the interior and walls that actually make them sturdier than solid bones. These hollow chambers can also act to both increase stamina of this raptor and act as a backup store of air. If it found itself having to run through tear gas, toxic aerosol traps, or debris-filled air, these would assist it in holding its breath long enough to get clear. Another genetic additive that we'll cover later will further help with this. Being modeled after the most powerful dromaeosaur to ever exist brings other benefits, such as the ones discussed in section number 2, jaws. The robust jaws and very sharp teeth of Utah Raptor will be excellent at dismembering its prime target, humans. Especially coupled with a wide gape that can open the jaws nearly 80 degrees. Trying to add on jaw strength from creatures like Deinosuchus or T-Rex will be overkill, and require some heavy muscular core and reinforcement on the neck and back just to use those jaws effectively. This smaller predator doesn't have room for this, and will add unnecessary weight. Again, remember that we only need enough bite force to dismember humans. Utah Raptor alone will do the trick. This contribution alone will produce a biting pressure of 1,200 to 2,000 psi, similar to some modern croc or alligator species. This may not sound like much, but just sit there and wait. It will get a lot worse. Similar to its extinct predecessor, lips would mostly cover up the teeth when it has its mouth closed, which helps in preserving the teeth long-term by avoiding rot from drying out and protecting the teeth from any chemical agents if it finds itself running through hazards. Unlike the original Indoraptor's exposed teeth shaped for gripping and stabbing, the use of Utah Raptor teeth would produce a more bloody wound. The dude in this scene would get its arm sliced off instantly by the new Indoraptor. There are, however, 2 new extra pieces of hardware that we are going to add from 3 mammalian predators. The perks of the short-tailed shrew have already been covered in the Indominus 2.0 episode. For quick recap, the red coloration of these teeth isn't blood, but rather remnants of iron deposits left on the tips of these teeth. In effect, these teeth are coated with metal, which will work great for gnawing right through body armor. In this case, the addition of the shrew will have a few side effects. Despite being about the same size as a mouse, shrews take multiple times more venom to kill because of their rapid metabolism. This also grants them enhanced reflexes and reaction times up to 12 times quicker than other mammals. This is what allows a shrew to dodge a snake strike and then proceed to kill the opponent that is multiple times bigger. Fights between shrews often need high-speed cameras to track anything beyond a blur. Now, this is not to say that Indoraptor 2.0 will fight or bite as fast as this shrew. Sheer size would slow down the 2.0, but it's still going to be extremely agile, even by dinosaur standards. If the 2.0 got into a brawl with the Scorpius Rex and was injured by venomous quills, it would probably shrug off the poison and proceed to maul the Berserk Scorpios. Remember how we mentioned that this Indoraptor 2.0 had a bite of up to 2,000 psi? Well, the addition of the next mammal will likely double it. There have been many killers across history with fanged maws or huge canines. Concentrating the bite force on fangs not only increases penetration and stab wounds, but allows easier targeting of vital areas that are protected by layers of muscle and armor. This is a big reason why fanged mammals can often punch well above their weight class. See for yourself. Plugging in some numbers into a formula that reveals PSI, we see that a bite that is 1,613.5 PSI can be increased 3 times by just pressing down on a victim using just 2 very sharp mammalian fangs. And that's reducing the force due to the fangs being at the front instead of the back of the jaw. And because we want this animal to kill as efficiently as possible, the fangs will come from a saber tooth. No, these won't come from a Smilodon. Larger ones will be awkward to use. Instead, the fangs of the underrated Hoplophoneus, nicknamed Butcher of the Badlands, and sporting a name that literally means murderous weapon, this jaguar-sized predator sported extremely sharp and serrated fangs with a sheath built into the lower jaw. This false feline predator earned its name by bringing down game up to 12 times its weight. Both mammalian shrew and saber-tooth attributes overlap to create fangs covered in iron, giving it a necessary edge if it has to go up against larger dinosaurs or an especially armored individual. Capable of piercing through the jugular or carotid artery of a large animal, something its predecessor would have trouble doing with its peg-leg teeth. The victims of a saber-tooth attack show that predators with these weapons could get creative when they're biting. Against armored prey, there were also some workarounds, such as stabbing directly into the brain case or going for the eye sockets. And this is not the only piece of hardware added on to the teeth. The incisors on the Indoraptor 2.0 might initially look like some kind of demented rodent, but they actually come from the notorious vampire bat, another mammal sporting blades sharper than shark teeth. A razor edge lacking enamel but protected by lips to keep them in good shape, these vampire bat teeth have been compared to blades slicing through tissue. With these teeth, even if the Indo bit down on armor that can flex and warp to slow down bullets like Kevlar, these teeth would go right through and open up a terrible gash. And the moment any teeth make contact, a follow-up attribute from the bat comes into play. Vampire bat saliva is coated in a potent anticoagulant venom called traculin that keeps blood from clotting. This kind of venom would leak into any bite wound, and anyone who somehow managed to get away would leave a thick blood trail. No matter what they did, or even if they had any medical attention, they just won't stop bleeding for a very long time. This, as you may have guessed already, makes tracking down anyone who escaped easier. That is, assuming they don't just bleed to death. Now, think about this for a second. A well-trained Indo 2.0 could be commanded to bite a single target in the field and then fall back. Then follow the victim until he leads the Indoraptor to where the rest of the group is hiding. The end result is a horrific snout with bite force of a Utah raptor, further multiplied by iron-covered teeth, saber fangs, and an anticoagulant tipped by bladed incisors. This is just the beginning. Soon you'll realize that this may be the most dexterous hybrid you've ever seen in your life. Section number 3, auxiliary weaponry. We've already talked about how marvelous the arm of an ape is from an engineering standpoint in a previous episode. A near-perfect mixture of flexibility and strength, making apes the only animals able to easily manipulate objects, carry their own weight, climb, and throw with great precision. So that said, it might be very tempting to pick the most physically powerful apes like gorillas or the extinct Gigantopithecus, or the most potentially aggressive chimpanzees. That said, almost any of the great apes would suit our needs quite well, but since behavior is going to be packaged with the DNA in some form or another, we're going to pick these guys, bonobos. These guys demonstrate complex creativity more so than most other apes. One individual named Kanzi was taught to make simple stone tools. He didn't just get too good at it, but invented his own manufacturing methods better suited to him than humans. Chimps and gorillas don't have the same manual dexterity, so this is why for the hand portion of this hybrid, bonobo DNA will be extracted and placed specifically on the arms and appendages. In addition, another reason why we opted for Hoplophoneus earlier was because this animal came equipped with sharp recurved claws that are at least partially retractable. Its shoulder and upper arms gave it proportionally the most robust shoulder and deltoid amongst saber-tooths. These two together will make Indoraptor 2.0 much more adept at climbing or digging using its forelimbs. More interesting capabilities would be surprising victims by opening doors and windows to take people off guard. Fast twitch muscles would also enhance claw strikes and grant a lethal grip. This raptor can now grab someone by the neck and stab its claws through the throat or choke the life out of them for a more stealthy kill. 5 digits tipped with claws on each hand and the opposable thumb would make it extremely difficult to dislodge it if latched onto a larger animal. Utah raptor was one of those large dromaeosaurs whose weight prevented it from leaping a large distance. This is why we carefully selected the vampire bat earlier. Most species of bats are helpless on the ground because of how their pelvis is shaped. Vampire bats uniquely have the ability to run and jump on the ground. Indo 2.0 might not have the proportional same jumping ability, but it will still be able to leap off the ground a good distance. With the solid combination of ape, bat, and Hoplophonius for arms and hands, Indoraptor 2.0 would be capable of quickly scaling up the sides of buildings, climbing, digging a tunnel to get underneath an especially tall fence, all while able to stealthily move around corridors and catch anyone off guard. Now it's time to discuss the most important part of this hybrid.
Oh, fuck!
Section number 4,
The brain.
The most important aspect of any working animal is its mind. No matter how big and powerful, if it can't follow complex commands or if it turns on its handler, this is not a weapon but a liability. And there is one predator with unparalleled cooperative skills, able to read human body language effectively and quickly pick up on our own habits, even to the degree of being able to register and understand human facial expressions and our line of sight. Yeah, we're talking about dogs.
Doggos.
The domesticated breeds of dogs known today are a result of careful selective breeding and behavioral manipulation that happened over 20,000 years, bringing forth animals whose relationship with humans is considered one of, if not the most sophisticated mutualisms in the animal kingdom. You might be able to tame a wolf, but it will never be as trainable or pass those traits on like a dog can. With proper care and smart handlers, Indoraptor 2.0 would be almost as loyal and obedient as any well-trained hound or shepherd. Again, making Indoraptor 2.0 bigger and stronger wouldn't always work for the purposes it's intended for. This is why police and military units use domesticated dogs, not lions or wolves. There are many breeds that would be suitable, but to align ourselves with a breed historically proven in warfare, a good contender would be the combat-hardened, now extinct Molossian Hound. Thought to be the foundation for several large dog breeds we know today, such as Mastiffs and Great Danes. These were animals renowned for their strength, obedience, and loyalty. Add in the extra perks of being ideal guard dogs and companions in battle. Selecting this particular dog breed would further enhance the collaborative nature of our new hybrid, and an extra helping of the previously mentioned bonobo gene would also factor. Cognitive tests have also demonstrated that bonobos are much less aggressive towards each other and likely to exhibit cooperative behaviors than other apes. A 2010 study on ape cognitive behavior revealed that bonobos have far better deductive reasoning and observational skills. This is good for watching a target and planning ahead of time on how to confront them. While training the new 2.0, any older individuals would be able to assist in mentoring the younger ones. Given both dogs and bonobos can understand plenty of hand gestures by people, it might be possible to teach these new raptors commands and cues rather than just pointing a laser or blowing a whistle. Furthermore, if a raptor had too many traits from animals that are either too aggressive or solitary, that would scramble all the instincts and commands in its brain. When running into battle or just killing a victim, our new raptor will not only rely on brains and weapons. Section number 5, armor. If the exterior of the 2.0 looks a bit fishy, that's because it should. It's literally from a fish.
What?
The arapaima is an apex predator fish from the Amazon rivers and one of the largest freshwater fish in the world. Some can weigh more than 400 pounds and be over 10 feet long. We selected this fish not only for the scales that we will discuss in a bit, but because this is one of the few instances of a fish being an air breather. That's right, the arapaima is an air-breathing fish, needing to surface every 15 to 20 minutes to gulp air. This animal has extra blood vessels throughout its body to transport enough oxygen to vital areas and a valve to close off the windpipe so the 2.0 can run through potential gases without these seeping in. The skin is the key feature here. Fish scales are tough already, composed chiefly of bone, unlike keratin scales of reptiles. But the arapaima and our new raptor will put all other comparisons to shame. Each scale is composed of multiple layers of microscopic fibers knit together almost like plywood with mineralized, almost rocky outer plating acting similar to bullet-resistant ceramic armor. And then a strong, flexible inner layer that acts like Kevlar. These scales allow for maximum mobility while still being extremely durable. How durable? For those who want a point of comparison, consider that a common main ingredient in bulletproof vests ceramic plating is silicon carbide, which has a fracture toughness score of 3 to 5. Arapaima scales have been found to have fracture points of 6.4. These scales can be further augmented.
Damn.
Vampire bats, while eating, have the ability to manage the heavy amounts of iron they take in with their bloody meals. With this ability, the excess iron could be deposited into the claws and scales, not to mention the already enforced teeth. This scaly armor, as seemingly impenetrable as it is, has one final trick up its sleeve. Color changing was something shown off to great effect by the Indominus, but it was hard to tell if the faulty prototype was intended to have the same ability. This was due to the cuttlefish DNA. Research has shown that this requires a very precise brain anatomy and control. So, to make our Indoraptor have this same ability without incurring the risk of brain incompatibility, there is a compromise. Anole lizards might look very unassuming, but they are some of the most highly successful lizards in the world. 400 species in just one genus. Amongst these, the water anole is the one we'll use. This species has a simple but very effective disruptive camouflage, able to change the color of its body and stripes between various shades of green, gray, and brown. Changing the color of its striping also helps in making it harder to see through foliage or underwater. For a bit of a psychological effect, and this is because the main target is humans, some of the color pigmentation levels will be genetically modified on the surface to create a skull-like image when viewed from head-on. Imagine seeing that face looking up at you from the water, down a dark hallway, or up a tree. Probably with some unlucky bastard's bloody arm in its mouth. And as an added perk, this lizard got its name for a reason. Water anoles are adept underwater thanks to a specific texture outside the scales, trapping air close to the skin. This allows the lizard to not only move quickly by running or swimming underwater, but even suck up some of the air through the scales and breathe out carbon dioxide to lengthen its dive. Strong claws and adhesive pads on the bottom of these toes help with both climbing and clinging to the floor when moving underwater. This attack animal could ambush a boat in the river by submerging and submarining its way towards it, crawling across the bottom to make less of a disturbance before climbing on board or yanking someone over the edge. Being able to find your target quickly and remain locked in is imperative for our Indo 2.0. In section number 6, we'll talk about senses. Pretty much the tools that this improved hybrid will use to track its prey. The baseline Indoraptor was intended to have echolocation abilities, and that is a good basis to start from. But this hybrid has several aspects that are both efficient and silent. Indo 2.0 keeps its echolocation abilities thanks to the integration of Vampire Bat, although admittedly not as good since it lacks ear cones and flight capabilities, but still enough to track down someone in near pitch black darkness and orient itself. These sounds are so high frequency that humans can't usually hear them, meaning that anyone this guy is detecting is unaware because 2.0 won't be making a ton of audible noise like the prototype. This bat resembles the abilities of some snakes as well. Thermal energy sensors built into the snout of the vampire bat have connections that feed back into the brain. This is similar to the ones found in pit vipers and used by the vampire bat to detect potential prey and find spots with optimal blood flow and thinner skin to strike at. Indo 2.0 takes these attributes and is capable of detecting which parts of the body are less armored and more likely to bleed out, especially with its anticoagulant saliva. Additional assets like the infamous good sense of smell hounds have alongside the shrew component means that 2.0 would be a superb tracker over a long distance. And seeing how well raptors track prey in movies, these attributes would further bolster this trait. Meet Indo 2.0, or as we named it, Mortalodon Anthrophagus, deadly-toothed human eater. Height 2.5 meters, length 5.5 meters, weighing 550 kilograms or 1,220 pounds. Being slightly shorter and lighter than the prototype aids in navigating inside buildings, scaling trees, and structures. Less weight equals less noise. Still, heavy enough to throw down with medium-sized dinosaurs and obliterate humans. An all-terrain hybrid able to run long distances, fly, and briefly submerge for a span of time.
Wait, go back up. Oh, you know, that horny fuck is doing the dirty! That dirty motherfucker! Oh my god! Goji say you horn dogs. Oh my god, that's fucking funny.
Climb, dig, and briefly submerge for a span of time. This genome, very carefully selected, would create a predator that would be much more amiable to follow commands, be friendly to its human compatriots, and merciless to its victims.
Look! I got shit! Buy my shit right now! Buy it! That was the Indirected 2.0. The ending though, what the fuck, Goji Center? He was fucking a guy doing his business. And the indirected like, fuck you doing? I gotta kill for that shit. Come here. Just grab and strangle him by the neck. Are you ready? Oh my god, Goji Center, that was fucking funny. That was the hybrids that caused the Great Hybrid War. Now I'll be going to Goji Guy and review Hank and Madden Mesozoigon, the elephant, Samson. Bye-bye!